Beneath the surface. The rain drizzled down and mixed with the tears on the mourners' faces as they gathered around the sleek hardwood coffin. The tombstone read, Margaret Wilson, loving mother of two. Liz Moore stood solemnly as she looked upon her mother for the last time. Margaret's grave was next to Eli's, her other child. Liz knew burying her there would put her mother at peace. Margaret requested that the mortician dress her in casual apparel, jeans, a worn-out t-shirt, and her favorite necklace, a locket with Margaret's picture in one half and Eli's in the other. At least they'll be together now, said Tom, Liz's husband. She can finally be happy again, Liz said, with Eli. She began to think back on her childhood. February 1st, 1983, the day the soft look in her mother's eyes turned cold, the day nobody saw coming, the day that Eli and their mother got into a car accident. The Wilsons were on their way home from dinner when a drunk driver crashed into the side of their car, the side where Eli was sitting. The drunk driver survived, but Eli did not. Liz had never seen her mother so heartbroken. Margaret had always loved Eli much more than she loved Liz. When Margaret found out she was pregnant with Eli, she was ecstatic. She had always wanted a baby boy. However, 3 months into her pregnancy, her doctor gave her shocking news. She was having twins. Not only did she only want a boy, but she also could only support one child.
The father left when he found out she was pregnant, so she had to rely on herself to provide for her family. She always seemed to blame Liz for their struggles. She already harbored much resentment for Liz, but after Eli's death, her mother lost all of her joy. They never spoke of him after that day. Liz would have done anything to bring her mother's happiness back. Liz even had a vivid memory of coming home one day dressed as Eli in hopes of pleasing her mother. Once mother sees me as Eli, she'll have to be happy again, she thought to her naive 8-year-old self. As she walked through the door, she instantly felt her mother's glare. She knew what was about to come as her mother approached her, unlooping her belt one loop at a time until the long length of the leather belt laid firmly in her mother's grasp. Liz, she flinched as Tom touched her shoulder, bringing her back into reality. The priest was saying his final blessing as the coffin slowly descended into the dark, freshly dug hole. Everyone began to gently toss dirt into the hole, but Liz just stared blankly across the graveyard as hundreds of tombstones before her. She thought about the hundreds of people that lay beneath the dewy grass and how many funerals had been held just like the one she was attending at that moment. This one was different, though. She wasn't crying for her mother like everyone else who had come to mourn. She was crying for herself and for the secrets that were being buried deep in the ground along with her mother. "Come on, let's go home," he said. He carefully grabbed his wife's cold, lifeless hand and walked her back to the car. "She just needs to go home and rest. She'll be fine then," Tom thought to himself. On their way to the car, they noticed a tall, black figure standing in the cemetery's parking lot. He was holding daisies in his hand, the edges of the petals tinged with death.
"It's Jason, hon," Tom murmured. Their eyes locked for what seemed like an eternity. He just had a blank stare on his face. Jason opened his mouth as if to make an attempt at some form of condolences, but nothing came out. His eyes lingered on her for a moment. Tom could have sworn that he saw something more in his stare. Liz just stood there, motionless, so Tom hesitantly extended his hand to receive the daisies. He eyed Jason suspiciously as his silent neighbor walked away. Tom and Liz continued to their car and took off. The drive home was long and silent. Tom finally asked, "That was odd, wasn't it?" He received no response. Then she unexpectedly breached the silence with a single statement. "He's always creeping out." Liz noticed the shocked expression on Tom's face and felt she should expand on her seemingly random remark. "I knew him as a child. He was always there, always watching my every move. I never liked him." "And you never thought to tell me this?" "Well, does it really matter, Thomas?" Her voice had taken a much harsher tone. As Tom looked into her eyes, he almost didn't recognize her. It was as if she were a completely different person. However, Tom brushed the idea aside as he knew his wife had already had an emotional and tiresome day. As the car drove up their driveway, Tom instantly recognized the tall figure next door. Coincidentally, Jason happened to arrive home at the same time as Tom and Liz. As they got out of the car and walked towards the house, Tom put a protective arm over his wife's shoulder. Upon entering into the comfort of their home, their pet Labrador retriever, Rover, looked at them expectantly, but it soon picked up on the mood of its owners and retreated to the couch. Liz immediately walked into their bedroom and crawled into bed. Tom wasn't sure how to comfort his wife.
It was as if every action he took or attempted to take only backfired. Seeing that it was already late, Tom decided to go to bed as well. Tomorrow will be better. It was 3 a.m. Tom rolled over and reached for his wife's body, but all he felt were cold sheets. He got out of bed to search for Liz and began to hear her faint voice coming from outside. It's the middle of the night. Who could she be talking to? He peeked through the blinds and noticed a familiar figure. It was Jason. He tried to read their lips, wondering what they could possibly be talking about. Then, Jason reached out to caress her face, but she quickly pushed his hand away and glanced around. He shines before she could notice him at the window and rushed back to their bedroom. Lying silently in the bed as if he were asleep the whole time, he heard the old chipped front door creak open and close abruptly. A few moments later, he felt her climb back into bed. As the both of them were lying in bed, Tom couldn't help but wonder if she was having an affair. Liz eventually fell asleep, but Tom was wide awake. The same questions kept running through his head. What was she doing talking to him? At this time of the night? Why'd he try and touch her? Soon enough, he fell asleep. The alarm sounded at 7 a.m. As he did every morning, Tom turned towards his wife to kiss her good morning until he realized that she wasn't there again. He called out her name, but he received no response. Nervousness filled his body. His palms began to sweat. What if she was with Jason again? He called her cell phone and sent her several text messages, but yet again, he was only met with silence. He started to panic, but forced himself to calm down and stop assuming the worst. As he paced across the living room, thinking about what he should do next, he noticed a small note on the counter. Confused, he picked up the note and was shocked by what it said.
If you want to see your wife again, go to the alley of JJ's pawn shop on 23rd Street. You have 24 hours. Call the police and she dies. From E.W. Who is E.W., Tom thought as he pondered over the frightening letter. I have no choice but to comply. They have my wife. Tom went back to their bedroom and grabbed the pistol that they had bought for emergencies. He rushed out of the house, hopped in his car, and sped off towards the pawn shop. As he drove down the quiet streets, Tom frantically tried to figure out the reason behind the instructions. Why would the kidnapper tell me to go to a pawn shop? Is this where she's being held? JJ, a family friend, owned the shop. As his car glided into the parking lot, he wondered what possible involvement JJ could have in this mess. As he stepped out of the car, he noticed on the ground near the side of the building laid a small envelope with the initials T.M. He picked it up, carefully unfolding the letter inside and reading what he was to do next. Inside the pawn shop is a gold watch with a 2/1/1983 engraved on the back. Meet me at Margaret's grave and bring the watch with you. Come empty-handed and you'll never see her again. Signed, E.W. The watch. Tom remembered Liz telling him that JJ was close to their family and wanted to give Margaret something to remember Eli by. Margaret refused the gift as it brought up too many emotions for her. JJ had kept it ever since.
He noticed a small window on the side of the building, just big enough for him to fit through. Once he broke the window with a nearby rock, he heard an alarm in the distance. He quickly climbed through and dropped onto the other side, falling into a pile of broken glass and cutting himself along the way. A man with a flashlight was rushing towards him as he stood back up. It was JJ. "Tom? What's going on?" JJ cried as he went to turn the alarm off. "Why are you climbing through the side of my shop?" Tom felt the pistol in his belt loop pressing against his stomach. He reached for it, extending towards JJ, who now had his hands up. "I do not want any trouble. I'm just give me the watch," Tom stuttered, remembering the first note that forbade him from telling anyone about the kidnapping. JJ suddenly realized what he was looking for. "You want the watch I was going to give to Margaret?" "Why?" JJ asked. "Just give me the watch. I don't have to do anything I'll regret." Tom hated himself for threatening his friend, but he had no other choice. He had to get Liz back. "Thomas, just settle down and tell me what's JJ started to say, but he never finished the sentence. Tom pulled the trigger, and the man's lifeless body collapsed onto the floor. "What have I done?" he thought to himself as he rummaged around the store looking for the gold watch. Tears started to blur his vision, but he just blinked them away. A few minutes later, he found the watch in the top section of a secured display case. Just as promised, it was made of solid gold and engraved with the date 2/1/1983 on the back. He put the watch into his pocket and rushed out of the door of the pawn shop. As he raced toward his car, he saw Jason in the corner of his eye. "What are you doing here?" Tom exclaimed. I saw you rush out of the house and I followed you here." "I knew something was wrong. What's going on?" Jason inquired. "My wife is missing." "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" "No, but I can help you find her." Thomas was wary of Jason's sudden urge to help, but he was desperate. Ignoring his knowledge of what has happened the previous night, he began to show Jason notes that he'd been receiving. Jason pored over the notes in a thoughtful manner. Once he finished reading them, he looked Tom straight in the eyes. "I'm going to help you find this madman," he said determinedly. They got out of the car and began driving towards the cemetery that they had been the day before. To Tom, it felt like a lifetime ago. It was late in the night, and the fog covered the road as he pulled into the graveyard. Tom and Jason walked briskly to the grave of Liz's recently deceased mother, with shovels from the pawn shop in hand, and hopefully thoughts of finally being able to see his wife again ran through Tom's mind. Thinking that they were reaching an end to this chaos, they received another note posted on the tombstone. "Your final task is to dig up the grave. If you succeed by midnight, your wife will be returned unharmed. E.W."
Tom and Jason began to dig up the freshly laid dirt until he hit the hardwood cover of the coffin. They grunted as they lifted the cover off. Margaret's dull gray hair gently framed her face, and her bony fingers were clasped together over her stomach. They both struggled to lift her cold, stiff body out of the coffin. Finally, they were able to set her down on the wet grass beside the pile of dirt that they had just dug up. Tom heard the soft rustle of grass in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. He realized that someone was approaching and turned around to discover a figure in the distance. She may have looked different, but Tom recognized Liz instantly. The womanly curves that shaped her body before were not there anymore. The long blonde locks that used to frame her face were replaced by a short, choppy cut, much like his own. Tom was speechless as the woman that he thought he knew so well walked towards the corpse, slowly unlooped the leather belt from her mother's waist, then put it on her own body. The light in her eyes was different, darker somehow. How could one day change someone so much? And why is she by herself? Tom thought to himself. He had expected that it would be different when they reunited. "Liz, are you okay? You look different," Tom whispered to her as she stared blankly at him. "I was always jealous of Eli," she finally said. Tom stood to his feet, confused by the remark. "Eli? Your brother? You're scaring me, Liz. What's going on?" He continued to reach out to her. As he began to walk towards Liz, Jason grabbed him and tied his arms and feet together. Confused, Tom tried to struggle out of Jason's tight grasp. Liz pulled out a shiny pistol and began pointing it in Tom's direction.
He froze. "Liz, what are you doing? I did all of this for you." "Do you have the watch?" she continued without answering him. "Yes, it's in my pocket. What do you even need it for?" Tom replied. Jason grabbed it from his pocket and handed it to Liz. After placing the watch around her wrists, she walked over and stared at her mother's corpse. As Liz approached her mother's body, she carefully took off the necklace around her mother's neck and put it around her own. The locket glistened in the moonlight, and Eli's face was clearly shown. "Liz, talk to me, please. I don't know what's going on. I thought you were kidnapped," Tom continued as he desperately tried to figure everything out. And then it all clicked. E.W.? Eli Wilson? How could I have missed this? She kidnapped herself. She and Jason both set me up. All the signs that Tom had subconsciously ignored came rushing back to him at once. "It's Eli," she flatly responded as she wrapped her finger around the trigger of the gun and fired at Tom. He fell back into the grave that he had just dug. As he laid in the ground, taking his last breath, he saw his wife and Jason walking off in the distance, hand in hand. She is Eli now, and they've fallen in love. He felt his heartbeat growing weaker by the second. Tom began to feel his life slowly fade away. "I've lost my life and my wife."